Modern cooking is flashy: sous vide machines, air fryers, high-speed blenders. But let's talk about something people often overlook: the brilliance hidden in the kitchens of the past. The methods your grandparents used weren't just quaint or old-fashioned, they were absolute genius. And we're finally starting to realize just how far ahead of their time they really were. Take broth making, for example. Today, bone broth is sold as a trendy superfood, bottled up and marketed for its collagen and nutrient-rich benefits. But this isn't some groundbreaking wellness hack, it's what your grandparents were doing every time they boiled down leftover chicken bones or beef scraps. They didn't waste anything, and in the process, they unlocked nutrients that modern diets are struggling to replace. Or think about fermentation. Before refrigeration, it wasn't just a way to preserve food, it was an art form. Grandparents knew how to transform cabbage into tangy sauerkraut, milk into creamy yogurt, and fruit into jars of bubbling preserves. These foods didn't just last longer, they became healthier, filled with probiotics that support gut health, immunity, and even mental well-being. They didn't have probiotic pills back then. They didn't need them. Even the way they cooked food was smarter than we give them credit for. Slow cooking over a pot on the stove or in the oven wasn't just about convenience, it allowed flavors to develop naturally, creating deeper, more satisfying meals. Pressure cookers, cast iron pans, and heavy-bottomed pots weren't just tools, they were essential for unlocking the full potential of ingredients. That slow braise. It didn't just make meat tender, it also broke down connective tissue into gelatin, boosting both nutrition and flavor. Your grandparents also had a knack for using every part of an ingredient. Chicken fat, known as schmaltz, was rendered and used to flavor dishes. Vegetable scraps became stock. Stale bread. It was turned into pudding or breadcrumbs. Nothing went to waste, because everything had a purpose. Contrast that with today's throwaway culture, where we discard perfectly usable parts of our food simply because we don't know what to do with them. Even their seasoning techniques were borderline alchemy. Salt wasn't just for flavor, it was used to cure meats, draw moisture from vegetables, and preserve foods for weeks. And when they seasoned, they didn't follow measurements, they trusted their senses. A pinch here, a taste there. It wasn't precision cooking, it was intuitive, deeply personal, and rooted in tradition. We call these techniques rustic now, but they were innovative solutions to problems we barely think about anymore. Food wasn't pre-packaged, pre-portioned, or pre-washed. Cooking was resourceful, inventive, and deeply connected to the seasons. They knew when to pickle vegetables, how to store root crops through the winter, and which herbs to dry for tea. Every choice they made in the kitchen was practical, sustainable, and often medicinal. And let's not forget flavor. The dishes they created weren't just about sustenance, they were celebrations of their surroundings and their cultures. Regional recipes were passed down like family heirlooms, each one carrying the memory of those who came before. The smoky depth of a pot of beans cooked over an open flame. The tang of buttermilk in a perfectly flaky biscuit. These weren't just meals, they were stories. What's wild is how much we're starting to circle back to these ideas now. Farm to table, zero waste, slow food, all these trends are really just echoes of what your grandparents did every day. They didn't call it sustainability. They called it survival. And they thrived on it. So, the next time someone calls your grandma's cooking old school, remember this: those techniques kept families fed, made the most out of every ingredient, and turned ordinary meals into masterpieces. They weren't just cooking, they were innovating. And maybe it's time we stop thinking of those methods as outdated and start recognizing them for what they really were: pure, unfiltered genius.